is the Two Marketeers podcast, where hosts and marketing experts Sean Patrick and Lindsay Waugh seek to uncover what makes brands so powerful in how they impact modern society and culture.
Two Marketeers, they've got a podcast, the Two Marketeers podcast.
Hello, Marketeers. Welcome to part 2 of our What Brands Say About Us episode. We left off part 1 where Lindsay asked me a very important question. Let's jump right in.
I've got a question.
Okay.
Has the affinity for those large trusted brands specifically changed at all for you lately, given the current state of North American politics? I don't want this to be a political discussion, and the reason I'm asking this question is because for me, brand, like it's tricky. I'm having this like internal conversation in my mind, especially with something like Starbucks, to be like, hey man, I love Starbucks as much as the next gal. Okay. I go there often. Mm-hmm. And now I'm just like, does it turn into a badge of like something I don't want to show? Absolutely. Because it's big, it's American, shame. It's this and that. I was going to say shame, but it seems a bit too far, where these brands now are like having a negative impact on not only my own view of myself, but my outward projection to people, versus when it was something I used to really use as a badge of honor.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Well, first of all, it has impacted my choices on the lower end of the brands I choose. The direct answer to your question is no, it has not.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Not in my top brands, not every brand. In my top brands, I went through the Starbucks thing actually when they were canceled by my kids because of the Israeli issue.
Right.
And because it was and this is where brand advocacy really means something. I have built a relationship with them. I have had a big part in building a relationship with them. Mm-hmm. A relation that's very, I never buy anything more than a brewed coffee, right? But every morning I finish the gym, I walk in, I see my people, and they were like, well, it was shame in this case, because my kids were like, all Starbucks canceled, right? Mm-hmm. This is what we know, and this is bad. And all I said was, the strategist says, do you understand? Yes. What your action is doing isn't going to change the thing you think you're changing. So, knowing Starbucks and being a huge fan, it's like, look, they've been all about community. I don't think they're an American brand. I think they're a global brand. And it's more of, like you said, Lindsay, this isn't a political argument. It's more of see the advocacy that happens when you find your people. So imagine, I'll give an example. What if one of my best friends does something really stupid, right? Whatever it is. One gets hurt.
They're out. Canceled immediately.
Let's use you as an example, Lindsay. Let's say you do something really stupid. Okay. Let's say you drink too much wine and you insult a colleague. Ooh. Never happened, just so we're clear. That's something I would do.
What am I up to?
Right? So the story around it is this person messed everything up. I'm done with them. Mm-hmm. I would be the first person that goes, okay, actually, first, I won't believe it happened. And if it did, I would go right to the source to say, is everything okay? What's going on? Mm-hmm. But my stance is to defend the people I trust most. That's why I love the friend analogy, because as you get older, you really do, hopefully, bring it in. Mm-hmm. There's a wisdom to it that I can't break the metaphor that a brand is just another human in your life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we
So
need brands.
do you have a perspective on like value brands in your life?
Yeah. So just to be clear, value brands, we mean economy brands, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm wearing, okay, you want an example? I actually just started a new relationship with a brand or rekindled it with Mark's. I think it's just called Mark's now. It used to be
Oh,
called Mark's
yeah.
Work.
Many people have. Many people.
And these pants that have taken the place of some Lululemon pants. They haven't taken the place. They've just sort of like, yeah, you got to get new pants once in a while. I trust this brand, but when I buy it, how I feel is totally different than the times I choose to buy Lululemon. So to your point, I deserve this. I know it's going to last a long time.
Yeah.
This, I call it a dupe. I don't, it's such a, this Lululemon has created an entire trend out of apparel, which is, what do we call it? Athleisure. We call it work casual.
Yeah, athleisure. Yeah.
It's like, yeah, but I'm not going to sweat in these pants. Or, you know what I mean? Like these pants don't need to breathe or stretch like they do in a workout. I don't need to spend $140 on them. I just need some pants to do the job. Value brands, I curate my life. And I think that's just across the board. As we age, we take control of our image. We get burned. We fall out of relationships. We start new relationships. And it's just that sort of, by the end, you have very few brands that you're even going to defend your use of. And I feel like back to your sort of like, if you've got the Birkin, or if you buy that Celine bag, you don't want to have to defend it because it matters to no one but you. And that's such a confidence. So it's so personal. It's so personal that I think when you look at a brand, it just reinforces the fact that like brands do the best when they understand people who understand who they are.
Yeah, I feel like the consumer may not even understand themselves, what it is that they're looking for. But I think consumer like desires and motivations and what we know about them has gotten significantly more complicated in the last 15 years of like analyzing what people are. It used to be like they're a luxury buyer, which means they're a luxury buyer. They go on yachts, they buy a Birkin, they only eat caviar every meal of the day. Like that's what they are. It's like, no, I think many, if not everyone in some capacity now does lead this curated lifestyle where it's the high lows. It's what are you willing to splurge on versus where do you save? What does that say about you? And how do all of those factors play into the brands that you buy and the person that you are? And I think so much so with like the next generation as well, where like they legit just can't afford things given the state of everything. So they're vintage shoppers, they're this and that. But then I think on one of our other episodes, you said like they may buy vintage, but they're willing to go splurge on a dinner or like whatever, which doesn't make sense. So like it's even for people who are strapped, are super strapped and feeling like the pressure, still in some capacity lead this curated lifestyle, which as a strategist and a marketer makes it ever more important to continuously study changing behavior and motivations and desires, but also makes it very complicated to uncover where people are willing to spend, where they're willing to splurge, where they want to save, and how that all plays into identity and how brands fulfill the desires of people. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And when you equate that to what's happening right now with this lack of certainty and decisions that aren't being made, the decisions that are being made are short-term ones, because that's what we do when we don't know what the future holds, right?
Are there even long-term decisions anymore?
I'd like to think so. But you're right. No, I'm of another generation, but you're right. I don't know that exists because any long-term decisions I have a lot of friends who are like fed up with their kids and like, they're never going to buy it. They're not fed up with their kids, but how are they ever going to afford a house? And I just said, well, what has to change is it's going to not become a norm for a house
to be a homeowner. Yeah.
Yes, to be something you need. And they're like, well, that's just awful. And I'm like, you know what? Look back 80 years post-war and look at eras in history. IKEA is a perfect example of a brand that came from an economic shift where people had to move. There was a middle class, and all of a sudden you went from living in an estate or a mansion with all this incredible, crazy, expensive crafted furniture to living in a hovel or on the street, to then all of a sudden there was this, there's these old buildings that are now apartments. And guess what? We need smaller furniture. And concept, build simpler, smaller furniture, but build furniture that you assemble only when it's in the place you need it to be. And then how does that stand the test of time, where now it's like, why is IKEA such a big brand? Because it all comes back to their roots. There was a design movement in furniture that was impacted by a culture and an economy that was new.
Yeah, I think the IKEA example is interesting because I think so many times with successful brands, you think they figured it out. They just like, we see this and this is what we're supposed to do. I don't think that was what happened with IKEA and the founder of IKEA, and like they tried a bunch of stuff. So
Fair.
as we say, like the consumer and desires and motivations are ever evolving and hard to understand and uncover. I think a lot of times we're like, we just got to get to the answer and figure out like where a brand fits. But I also think as the consumer is this complicated kind of curator, sometimes you also have to just try stuff to be like, we're not sure exactly where this fits. Can we keep aside a part of our budget to be test and learn and research and development, just be like trying some things to figure out the best way for this brand to fit into their lives, as consumers are complicated and hard to understand. Like with No Frills as an example, I'm sure that they didn't just pop up with this huge emotional haulers campaign out of nowhere to show up as a value brand that's a badge of honor. It's like testing some things, figuring out those messages. Do people latch on to that? Is that something that they actually are willing to put pride in? And maybe, yes, they are. And now let's build some momentum behind it and like keep going. And so I also think sometimes we just look for the silver bullet. And we're like, look what IKEA did. They found this niche and they just like ran after it. Whereas I don't think it's that simple. It's not that simple. And which just encourages me to say to marketers and to brands, it's hard to figure out and you just got to start trying. And sometimes you have to test stuff to see the best place where you fit into people's lives based on this curated mindset of pride and high-low value.
Yeah, actually, the IKEA example, I'm not arguing with you, is you're totally right. The movement what I'm talking about is a movement that happened. And one company, a lot of them did, figured out the problem. How do we help people who are in this new sort of economic state? And the reality is where they live, there's no furniture. There's no easy way for them to furnish. So what IKEA has done, to your point, is done exactly what you said. We have to keep trying, and they've failed many times. But what's different is, you said, I think you have to have the mindset of trying and always learning, and learning regardless of what happens. And I think there's a perception that good brands never screw up. Actually, good brands screw up a lot. But when they finally get it right, because of all the learning that they've collected, it becomes that silver bullet that everyone tries to emulate. No one's talking about the 6 failures. They're talking about the 1 success.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
And so it's that mindset of thinking into the future. It's not about what are we doing in 5 years. It's about all we know is in 5 years, whatever we do, it will be informed by all the information we've been gathering for the past 10 and the next 5. and always
Right.
testing. So I do think bringing it down to the mindset for brand people, companies should be one of how brands last is when they always think of the consumer
Mm-hmm.
and
And
what they
like
care about.
the deep-seated desires, what brands say about your identity and how those brands like fit into people's lives in a curated way. I really think that every brand marketer needs to think of their consumer at the heart of everything in this like curated fashion in some sense.
And it's so important to be consistent to that, is to say everything you do, your actions aren't for any reason other than to show you're trying, right? You're just, okay, what did we get? What did we get from it? And I look back at the brands that I love, is they've made a lot of mistakes, but I've always understood, or when they've made them, they've made good on them.
Right.
They've repositioned. They've really said, wait a minute, bad move. What do we do? And I think there's just no time or investment in that kind of thinking right now. Is we can't screw it up. We have to do this right every quarter for the foreseeable futures. And what does that look like in 5 years? They're not even asking that question. Remember, like that used to be a big thing with us. Where are we in 5 years now?
What's our 5-year plan?
Now it's like, what can we launch in 3 weeks?
Exactly. Well, great conversation, Sean, for sure. I think there's so much to unpack around like what brands mean for us and do for us. And always just trying to understand that evolving mindset is critical. So very curious about this topic over time.
I think it's interesting how when you force yourself to look at, as a brand expert, when you force yourself to look at what brands mean to you as a human, it really helps you to appreciate all the little things they do has integrity, and they're a human I'm connected to.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, thanks for hopping on and chatting about this today.
Thanks, Lindsay. Marketeers, have a great 2 weeks.
Have a great 2 weeks. Okay, we'll talk to you soon. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Two Marketeers podcast. New episodes launch every 2 weeks.
Find the Two Marketeers podcast on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, or wherever you like to listen. And be sure to rate and subscribe.
Listen on our website, thetwomarketeers.ca, or you can ask Alexa to play the Two Marketeers podcast.
Want to keep in touch? Follow the Two Marketeers on LinkedIn or at Two Marketeers on TikTok. We've always got something to share.
This podcast is over.